So a few weeks ago, I was out in that narthex area, and Emily Bright Kruzak was reading from her books of poetry. Okay, and I got to admit, being a youth pastor, I go out and see a lot of things that youth are doing. I see skating shows, I see drama, I see plays, I see plenty of sports, and a lot of the times when this is happening, I am fixated, on let's say it's a play, I'm looking at the script and saying, where's little Johnny going to show up? Where's little Johnny going to show up? But there's a wonderful moment that happens when I realize I've forgotten who I'm actually there to see, and I'm just enjoying the entire experience. And then I actually get surprised when little Johnny shows up, and it's like, oh, look at that, that's why I'm here. Well, when Emily was reading her poems, Emily is actually a parent of a youth, right? So, and it's very difficult for me to get lost in that because Emily is all by herself, she's reading her poetry. But there was a wonderful moment when she was reading her poetry that I just felt the Spirit of Christ pour out through her and through the room of the various people that were there. Later that day, she was selling her books, and she basically had her daughter, and she had another young friend of her daughter's, and I spent some time with those two young people. And as they were, giggling the way that these young elementary kids are likely to do, and there's just a beautiful moment again where I could sort of experience Christ shining through these two young elementary kids. The next day, I think I'm right in the chronology, the next day was Tom Adams Sr.'s celebration of life. So we're all gathered back here for a completely different reason. And one of the things about Tom Adams Sr. that I really, really, really appreciated was that usually when I serve communion, I'm serving it right there. And when Tom and his wife Nettie were no longer really able to come up to receive communion, I would go and bring communion out to them in their seats. And Tom would always look at me with the serve Nettie first. Serve Nettie first. It was always like, go and serve Nettie first. Well, now during his celebration of life, I had a wonderful moment where I could go and right up to Nettie, and it was just her and I, and zoom in on this moment about how much love and dedication he actually had for her, and it was certainly returned. And then, and again, experiencing Christ in that moment. And then we actually went and did the service. And of course, wonderful music was chosen, wonderful music was done. And normally I don't get a chance to worship as much inside the pews. Usually we're sitting up front. But this time, of course, I was more than happy to sit in the back and partake in this worship. And this beautiful voice, Deb, was behind me. Deb probably doesn't like being singled out, but I'm going to give it to her anyway, because Deb's voice was roughly about here. And as she was singing, and my fairly lame attempt at singing was joining with her, it was again a wonderful moment of beauty as all of us sort of were singing together. And I'm going to say that basically each of these moments were basically a Pentecost moment. It's a moment where I felt the Spirit rushing through, and it's a moment of deep understanding. So let me tell you a little bit about what stands out to me about Pentecost. We have the rushing wind, right? And the long-time metaphor of wind is basically the breath and spirit of God. We have the wildfire. And other translations will basically say that the divided tongues of fire appeared among them. The tongues rested on each of them, and then they filled with the Spirit. They were filled with the Spirit and started speaking in a number of different languages. We get told that many people from all over the known world, with all their languages and culture, gathered. And why did they gather? Pentecost was already a festival, already before the Christians got a hold of it. This festival marked 50 days, I should say, after the harvest of barley began, and that began at the start of Passover. Pentecost, from their perspective, marked the end of the harvest and the celebrations of the first fruits of spring. For Christians, it became the first fruits of Jesus' ministry, the beginning of the church. And for us at Advent, it marked the start of a very great fruity adventure for all of us. When we return to the story of Pentecost, all these people from all over the known world with this great diversity of custom and languages, suddenly all these people could understand each other. Not necessarily each other, but they could understand these simple people from Galilee. Ignited by the fires of Pentecost, through these simple people, people from all over the known world understood and could be understood. Now, this happened over 2,000 years ago. So is that it? I mean, we have the birth of the church, and then that's it. This is the issue I kind of have with some people's approaches to the Bible and our faith. They basically treat this Bible as a history book, and it's so much more, and this is a great example. The fires of Pentecost happened, they're happening now, and will happen long after we are gone. Pentecost moments are burning all around us if we just had eyes to see and ears to hear. Understanding Emily's poems, what happened right after I had that experience, I wrote it down in my little journal of a sort. Later, I went to approach Emily, and I said, boy, Emily, I just saw the Spirit of Christ pouring through you, right? And like any good person, she basically said, well, which poem was it? Which is the poem that actually moved you like that? And I just looked at her and said, I can't remember. I can't remember which poem it was. So I asked her for her playlist. I said, I'll read through them at home. I'll try to figure this out. I read through them at home. I couldn't find it. And the reason I couldn't find it, I honestly think, is that Christ isn't in the words of the poem, right? It's not just in the words. Christ was in Emily at that time. It was in her words and in the group of people, including me, that were gathered. It's kind of like being moved by a piece of music, which Daniel should appreciate, right? Being moved by a piece of music. When you look at this piece of music, you need to understand, it requires an instrument. It requires a player. It requires people that might actually appreciate where this music comes from, might understand what the composer was trying to get at, or honestly, just might feel moved. But looking at a score is not going to give you the same experience, obviously, as reading a book of poetry. Having someone read the poem out loud and understanding them and what that poem meant goes a long way to the sort of Pentecostal fire moment that I experienced. I don't want to sort of discount whether or not you can have a Pentecost moment on your own, because maybe you can, but I just think that you generally need others. The fires of Pentecost comes from the understanding of others. It comes from understanding the joy of those two young children selling books. This is where I should have practiced this more and see if this would work. There it is. Two young children selling books, and the joy that was actually coming from not just, the pride of one of the daughter and the enjoyment of this other kid with being there, but just like the enjoyment of two young elementary people. It comes from looking into the deep eyes of someone else at their celebration of life of their spouse, of their beloved spouse, and getting that deep understanding that comes from a very, very profound and deep relationship of decades of marriage. And it comes from hearing the wonderful voices and singing of the songs. And in this case, I'm going to give her another call out, Deb's voice, and hearing, at least the way I thought of it, the Spirit rushing through her voice. And a community joined together in voice and heart to share one another's grief. We are not drunk here at Advent. I certainly wasn't drunk at Emily's poetry reading, nor was I drunk during Tom's celebration of life. It was just that at those moments, I was more attuned to the Spirit than usual. And this Spirit, this gift of the fires of Pentecost, is still moving. This fire still burns. As the Spirit is poured out into us, it's like gasoline fueling this fire within each of us. And the darkness of the world can recede, at least for a brief moment. And maybe even for that brief moment, we can see the world as God would want us to see it, and perhaps even a glimmer as God sees it. So why don't we see this more often? I cannot think of a better analogy as to why we can't think of this more often than what this thing is. This thing is a virtual reality headset. And when I put this virtual reality headset on, at this moment, great visual for the camera. At this moment, I can't see anything except what this device wants me to see. I can barely hear anything except what this device wants me to hear. I have surrendered all control over my reality to the reality of this headset. It's the most extreme example, but I hope you can appreciate the metaphor. And I can also hope you appreciate that this particular headset was made by the same people that made Facebook. All right? So when we go through life with other people deciding what they want us to see, other people making us see how they want us to see others, hearing only what they want us to hear, and us hearing only the poisonous messages they have to offer, how are we supposed to see the fires of Pentecost? I wish the only thing being poured into us was the Spirit, but sadly, there are other fonts as well, and of course I left it there, but the phones, the social media, even our news outlets. We all get the steady diet that can make it harder and harder for us to see what God is doing, for us to receive what God is giving. It can make it harder and harder for us to understand what God wants us to understand. All around us in our culture, especially heightened now, we are immersed in the false images and toxic messages. We are being fed toxins figuratively and literally. Even in Paul's day, by the way, he was aware of this. In a letter he wrote to a young church in Ephesus, he wrote that we aren't fighting against human enemies, but against rulers, authorities, forces of cosmic darkness, and the spiritual powers of evil in the heavens. Now, it might be a bit dramatic that I'm kind of referring to this in the same breath as our phones and VR sets and our media, but I wonder how close that actually is. If we are not vigilant, if we are stuck and shackled to our devices and our own vices, not only will we miss the fires of Pentecost around us, but how many others will miss them too? If we can't break out of these false realities, we will never fully receive the gift God continues to give us. So what to do? And, should we spend hours and hours in Bible study? Should we go deep into the woods on spiritual pilgrimages? Maybe, come to church daily. Maybe some do and maybe some can. I'll tell you what I do, right? What I do is to try and keep the fires burning in me and help those fires burning in others. How do I do this? As much as I can, I try to practice persistent presence and persistent prayer. I try to be the presence of Christ by embodying Christ simply with a well-timed smile. I will be walking through the hallways of my new job, and sadly someone will come at me walking, and I'll smile at them. Very rarely will they smile back, probably about 1 in 10. But that's okay, right? Because I'm basically offering Christ to them in a simple smile. And I also will return every smile I basically get. And one other thing I'll say too is that whenever I see a child in, let's say a grocery store and they're having a pretty bad time, I'll always smile and engage that child, right? Because I'm trying to remind them there's at least one other adult out there that's on your side in this, right? So I'll basically sit there and smile at them. I also try to be the presence that that person needs by listening without thinking about what I'm going to say. Right? Someone comes up to me and says, my dog died. The instinct of all of us is to say, yeah, my dog died too. That's very sad, right? But that's not what really should be said at this moment. I'm going to tell you, going to give you an acronym. I'm going to ask you to wait. WAIT is an acronym for why am I talking? Why am I talking? If the person basically says, my dog died, and I'm going to basically say, hey, yeah, my dog died too, why am I talking? Is it to be truly empathetic and share that moment with this person? Or am I actually yanking the conversation away from that person, holding it to me because I want to feel better that I'm basically trying to comfort that other person? Why am I talking? It takes quite a while to figure that one out. You try to listen, or at least I try to listen, with the ear of my heart and leave room for the Spirit to talk through them. Something I've learned, it's taken me a long time, but not every silence needs to be filled. As much as possible, I'm constantly reflecting on what I'm grateful for. Gratitude is a powerful spiritual device. I don't want to keep focusing on what I don't have. There's plenty of things around me that's actually trying to convince me of all the stuff I don't have. What I want to do is basically practice the gratitude for the stuff I do have. And what a tremendous act of defiance it is against those toxic voices around us when we persist in practicing gratitude. I also try to look for small or maybe big ways, but I'm trying to give you some small ways. I try to look for small ways to help others. Simple acts, even like holding a door open for somebody or offering those powerful words, "How can I help you?" but actually meaning it. In small or big ways, I feel that those can actually alter the trajectory of someone's day. I've seen it alter the trajectory of someone's day. I try to persist in service. And I pray, mostly little ones. But I firmly believe these prayers don't have to be long and they don't have to be perfect. This is why I insist on the youth praying during the youth nights. I mean, I could pray, I get that, but I want them to understand that these don't have to be long or perfect. Imagine if you had a child that wanted to talk to you, but that child couldn't talk to you until they presented a 20 PowerPoint slide presentation. Can you imagine that? Of course that's not going to happen, right? When a child talks to you, the child's telling you exactly what they want. It could be imperfectly spoken. It could be very small. That's what I'm suggesting to you prayer can be. And as far as I know, we are the only animals that actually do pray. We are actually built for prayer. And I would argue Daniel as well, built for music, but that's another sermon. We are built for prayer. So even people who have no faith life whatsoever find themselves praying. So a few times a day, I try to take a moment to connect to that fire that's within me and within others. Did you notice how many times I said, "I try to," right? I try to. My wife's right here too. So she knows how many times I try to, right? This is very much a practice. I'll say this a lot at weddings too. It's very much a practice. And while I'm quite imperfect at this, as the saying goes in our Wesleyan tradition, practice makes perfect. Special joke for you Methodists out there. Maybe you are already doing some of this yourselves. Maybe you're already practicing small acts like this in your own way. Keep practicing. It'll be easier to see the fires of Pentecost if you are actually feeding those flames. Now, if you walk away from the sermon thinking, that this is basically, Grant saying, look for ways to be nice to people. If all that survives in the sermon after we sing this hymn is being nice to people is good, I guess that's okay, because we definitely need that. And honestly, most of our sermons, Eric, can be summed up as that. But what I hope sticks out a little bit longer is that persistent presence and persistent prayer is a practice. And while smiling, listening, being grateful, service, and praying will all lend some part in mending a broken, poisoned world, what I'm going for is for you guys to all be awake. I want you to awaken the fires of Pentecost all around us. I want you to awaken the fires within us. Don't let all that's around you put you to sleep. Don't let it kill you. I'm taking minor liberties a bit here with Ephesians, but wake up, sleeper. Get up from the dead, and Christ's fire will shine in you. Persistent presence and persistent prayer will help you see the fires of Pentecost that still burn. It'll help you ignite new ones in others, and maybe even yourselves. The abundant life we are building here in Advent, the abundant life that Jesus offers, is built on these little fires if only we could see them. Now, I really don't know how much of this sermon actually lands. It could be too long, could be too short, could be relatively convoluted. I'll say this. I would say to my daughter, like all, in my opinion, almost all teenage women, she inundated with the toxic world around her, would be constantly fed messages of how she was not enough and how bad she actually was. She was constantly fed this stuff. And in moments of anguish, I'd say to her, I wish you could see yourself as I see you. And that is my wish for you. I wish you could all see yourselves as I see you and as I suspect God sees you. I want you to be open to the Pentecost fires that are around you. I want you to be aware that the Spirit moves through you and around you. The Spirit is within you, and the Spirit is within everyone. Yes, everyone you see. When we all see these fires of Pentecost burning, our churches, our families, our schools, our communities, our nation, and our world will be a much brighter place. Amen.